Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the Audible Quarterback Analysis Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42 here, discussing some quarterback options and reading off of one of our articles here on dailyfantasycafe.com by Zach. He's at Zach Scott Moxie on Twitter. And I'm running down some of his top plays. He's got Matt Ryan here listed at the top. We all saw Matt Ryan mostly with Julio Jones, but spread it around to some other guys as well. Looked very good in his first performance against the Eagles in a narrow victory there. And he threw for 298 yards, did have two interceptions, threw 2 touchdowns, both to Julio Jones. And facing a Giants team that, we saw some Dez Bryant in this game. Dez Bryant wasn't much of a factor. Then he was injured. They ended up leaving the game eventually. And Tony Romo put up some solid numbers against this secondary. We know this isn't a great secondary anyway. Definitely a team that can be beat. You got a 24-point team total for the Falcons and Matt Ryan here. And the Giants allowed almost 8 yards per attempt. Obviously, those numbers are a little bit skewed by some of the late passing by Tony Romo in that game when the game was close, when they were making the comeback in the fourth quarter. Romo had a ton of those yards in the fourth quarter, but still a guy that should have time in the pocket. I mean, the offensive line looked fine, and like you said, a high team total, and $7,400 on DraftKings seems like a really nice price there. I think he's going to be a guy that going to see a pretty decent amount of ownership paired with Julio once again in cash games and GPPs this week. A guy that was very low owned last week, but should be seeing some more ownership this week. Got Drew Brees, a 28.8 point team total. Huge team total for him there. We saw Marcus Mariota absolutely shred this defense last week. Obviously, Mariota making his first start. He's certainly not Drew Brees. Drew Brees, though, should have very little resistance from this secondary. This defense just looked absolutely terrible in all facets of the game. And obviously, we saw the running backs were a huge part. They were targeted 15 times in this game. C.J. Spiller is expected to return in this one. As of right now, I think he's officially listed as questionable, but looks like he's on the right side of returning. If he returns, that adds a big part to that game. We know that this Saints offense throughout the years with Drew Brees, it was Darren Sproles back in the day, Ingram, Pierre Thomas, whoever it may be. Running back's a huge part of the passing game, and getting a weapon like C.J. Spiller back could absolutely raise his floor in a big-time way there. And the Bucs allowed 13 yards per attempt there. Obviously, the 4 touchdown passes by Mariota. So Drew Brees, the guy we expect to have pretty high ownership here, going to be a guy that's going to be throwing the ball. And Mark Ingram has emerged over the past few seasons as a reliable running back. So you got a reliable running game, opens up the passing game as well. Got some young receivers in there, Brandon Coleman, some other guys that definitely give you some upside with Drew Brees, and you expect he's going to be a pretty popular play this week. Absolutely. And then a guy that was absolutely incredible first week, one of the best values on the week at any position, Carson Palmer for the Arizona Cardinals. Coming back this week, 23.8 point Vegas team total. DraftKings still has him at just 6,700. He's only 78 on FanDuel, and he's going up against the Bears defense that didn't look terrible at times last week, but still, they bent, and then they broke when it mattered. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers is a much better quarterback than Carson Palmer. But this, especially with Andre Ellington now sidelined for a few weeks, you're going to have Chris Johnson in there. Hard to say how reliable he's going to be in the running game. We know he's had some ups, he's had some downs, but not a guy that you're expecting a huge amount of volume out of. And Carson Palmer, hopefully Michael Floyd healthy now. And John Brown looked solid in the first game. Larry Fitzgerald, lots of other options for Carson Palmer in this one. So 8.2 yards per attempt allowed by the Bears in the first game. And you got to expect that Palmer continues his great start to the season this week in that fine matchup against that Bears defense that is going to have a hard time slowing down this passing attack. Maybe they focus on the pass and it opens up the run. But, I mean, all in all, this is just a pretty bad defense that I don't even expect to be as good as they were last week. I think that it was a hype game. They played well in the big game against their division rival. I'm still not a believer this defense is any good at all. They still end up giving up over 30 points. So don't be surprised to see similar totals this week. Tyrod Taylor, once again, no longer $5,000, but he's 63 and 62, FanDuel and DraftKings respectively. Obviously, team total is not very high against the Patriots, is $2,200, but he's still a fine value. Rushed for 41 yards last week and was incredibly efficient through the air. 14 of 19 for 195 yards. Long touchdown pass to Percy Harvin as well. And the Patriots allowed 9.2 yards per attempt in the opener. Obviously, they were facing Antonio Brown, but that was also an offense that was missing some key pieces. So this is certainly a defense that can be beaten through the air, but it remains to be seen if Tyrod Taylor can do that. Maybe he has to run a little bit more. And Sammy Watkins should be actually involved in this one because he was locked up with Vontae Davis last week. One of the best cover corners, if not the best in all of football. So obviously Sammy Watkins was a non-factor. Got to imagine he'll be able to get back involved here. Nobody on that Patriots defense that's quite the lockdown player that Vontae Davis is. So still pretty much a GPP guy. If you have to punt in your cash games, some people may look this direction. I don't think it's a terrible play. Probably not one that I'll be going with. I'm going to be paying a little bit more. I mean, you got Matt Ryan listed just over $1,000 more. I think that's a much safer play for you there. But certainly if you could fit some other big position players in there, you could certainly do much worse. And then GPP plays here. Tom Brady, 23-point Vegas total. This one is expected to be a good game. This was a defense that shut down Andrew Luck completely. And Zach's got him listed as GPP only because this is such a tough matchup. And Brady, 288 yards, 4 touchdowns against the Steelers. Granted, the Steelers' defense nowhere near what the Bills is, but Tom Brady has done very similar things in much tougher matchups in his career. Does very well against the Bills, and this is going to be a huge game for them, especially as good as the Bills looked in Week 1. And they're going to be a lot of short passes, I would imagine, in this game. The Bills are going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Expect Julian Edelman to be a big part of this. Rob Gronkowski as well, of course. But, I mean, that goes without saying that he's going to be the focal point. But a lot of guys that Tom Brady can rely on in the short passing game. And, I mean, that's his bread and butter. He throws the ball short and lets his receivers make plays. And this is definitely a situation where you don't want to have a ton of Brady exposure, but he's cheap on both sides. And Zach mentions here the last time he faced the Bills, he only threw for 80 yards. So GPP play, but it's still Tom Brady, one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen in our generation. So certainly a guy you need to be considering despite the tough matchup. Next up, he's got Joe Flacco. Flacco was awful in Week 1 against the Broncos, as he mentioned here. He's only $6,200 on DraftKings, and he only had 117 yards, 2 interceptions, but that was a very good defense. This week, facing an Oakland team that was absolutely terrible. Andy Dalton and the Bengals absolutely shredded them. Got to expect Justin Forsett opens up some opportunities in the passing game for you there. And obviously, this is a Ravens offense that's not expected to be a great offense this year, but this is the kind of spot where you want to target a Joe Flacco. 25-point Vegas team total there. I mean, he is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton, and we all know that. Not quite elite. Maybe you ask Joe Flacco, he's going to say he's elite. But Joe Flacco, a talented quarterback. He has some weapons. And this is a team, this Raiders team, despite having some great pass rushers on that line, didn't have a single sack. So if Flacco has time to throw in the pocket, got to expect he's got some upside. And especially at that DraftKings price, he does have that upside at $6,200. So check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com. Got your NFL needs covered all week long. Still have some MLB content for those of you who are fighting it out till the bitter end like myself. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all the rest of our great content, and we'll see you next time.